Hey, it's Mark at Magnetic, and today I have someone really special for you to meet. This is my friend Stacy McPherson. She is the owner of Happy Life Results, and she helps people with their relationships in lots of different ways. To tell you a little bit about Stacy and what really impressed me about her is that she's a mother of 7 kids, and she goes all around the world with the family, the husband, and the reason why I wanted to get Stacy on our channel is all about unlimited growth, how to remove all the limits in your business and your life and live the life you want, have the business you want. And we have a lot of people who are in business and they're still human beings. They have relationships and they may be successful, they may be just starting up, but you have to have relationships. You have your spouses, you have your friends, you have your colleagues, you have business partners, you have your clients. You have all sorts of relationships in business. And what I thought would be great was to have Stacy share some of her journey, because she is an entrepreneur and you travel all around the world. Not just travel, but live all around the world. You move your family from place to place. So she's not only been in the US, but also in Israel, also in Thailand, also in Hungary, and you go all over the place. And she's spoken on stages where you've got thousands of people listening to her with her knowledge and her experience in walking the talk of actually having fantastic relationships. And over the 5 years or so that I've known Stacy, it's just something that she does. It's part of her life. And it's really amazing to see, because some of the things that I see very commonly with people that I meet, whether people who are in business or employees of businesses, they have so much stress and they have so much conflict and they don't know how to deal with it. Sometimes it also affects their life, their family life, their home life, love life, whatever other part of life they have on top of their work. And I just wanted to get Stacy to share what she does and how she makes things so good, because Stacy's someone you will always see with a smile. It's just amazing what she does. And she's, you might think she has an easy life, but she goes through a whole bunch of stress. Anyone with 7 kids would have gone through a whole bunch of stress. Anyone running a business, anyone traveling overseas with the entire family, kids and grandkids and everything, is gonna produce stress. But she is always happy, and she's genuinely happy. And it's not because it's an accident or she just naturally was born that way. Maybe part of it is, but she has these amazing tools and amazing processes that she goes through that actually get that result. And it takes hard work, doesn't it, Stacy?
Yes, it definitely does.
Yeah, so I'd really love you to share some of your experiences and tools. I probably just have a bunch of questions for you, and just want to find out what would be helpful to our audience. And just to give you a bit of context, Stacy helps people with their relationships, whether it's saving their relationship or making it better. She also helps people have better relationships with themselves and gives them the confidence if they want to pursue their passions, they want to pursue their goals, their dreams, to start up a business. A lot of people, especially if you're a mother and you've been looking after your kids for a while and you want to get back to the workplace or you want to start up a business, how do you get the confidence to do that when you've got so many obligations and so many things to do? Stacy has done that herself, and so she helps other people go through that as well and get to the position where they can do that. The other thing she does is she helps with the general range of stresses that people have. It could be that people want to quit smoking. People are losing sleep because of certain stresses and tensions. There might be people who just want to lose weight, people who want to improve eating habits. I'd really love for Stacy to share some things, because I think people will really benefit from hearing what she's got to share in this area. So, Stacy, first question for you, for business owners specifically. A lot of business owners are under a lot of stress. They're running a business, they're spending many hours at work, and when they get home, they're tired. And one of the real common things that I experience and what I hear about is that when they get home, they're so tired, they don't know how to make quality time for their kids. Sometimes they're not present, and sometimes they're just so tired and they don't know how to spend that quality time. And what you've done, you've been able to not only have kids and have a business and support each other, including your husband and his career. How do you actually make time for each other and remain present and get the quality time with that many things that you're looking after?
Yes, yes, it is challenging. And I definitely have put things into place that have made it better and better. And one example is that when you're deciding, you get home from work and you're exhausted and you're like, okay, what do I want to do with the kids? How am I going to do this? Realize that the process of deciding is a high energy task. And so sometimes when you're faced with a high energy task, you'll just say nothing. High energy task or nothing. So a lot of times you'll just feel like, I don't have anything left to give, so I'm going to give nothing. And the problem isn't that you have nothing to give. It's just that you're asking yourself to do a high energy task when you're tired. So what you want to do is you want to do high energy tasks when you're fresh, when you're awake, when you're alert, and when you have that kind of energy. So the solution is just to schedule things because that's a high energy task. And if you want to have positive interactions with your family when you get home, one of the best ways is to do what I call a yes storm. So you've all heard of brainstorms, right? Brainstorms are when you just throw out ideas and you don't reject any ideas during the brainstorm because you want those creative juices flowing, right? So what you could do is you could sit down with your family when you're feeling fresh and awake, maybe a Saturday morning, and you say, okay, let's brainstorm. And I call it a yes storm because you don't say no to anything during this period of time. No no's. It's a yes storm. We just say yeses. So if your child says something crazy, something ridiculous, expensive or illegal or ridiculous, right? You say yes and you write it down because we're saying yes to all of our ideas. So you do your yes storm when you're high energy. And then what do? You take the things that you found out that you want to do and you schedule them. So when you're coming home, you're tired, you've had a long day, you don't want to do a high energy task, which is deciding what to do. Instead, you just look at your calendar and you go, today we're going to have a candle party. We're going to light candles and we're going to play with the wax and not get burned. Like, okay, let's do that. You can do it when you're lower energy. You can bring low energy to a candle party. And this is one that my kids love. Mom's going to let us play with fire, it's really fun. Or just something, whatever it is that you decided you're going to do. Maybe it's yard work. When you're exhausted, you can do things as long as you don't have to decide to do them. They're already there.
That's something that's super insightful because I have found that if I am tired, I don't want to make decisions and I don't want to have to think, what do I eat? What do we do? Where do we go? And it's really draining. But if you actually know already what you're going to do, you can actually just do it and enjoy the process. That's a great insight there. Do the decision making when you are fresh and you have the energy, and then actually take the action when you don't have to think. All right, Stace, so I have another question for you, given that a lot of people, especially in business, sometimes you even have the husband and the wife or, a couple, partners, both have a business, right? They're both running a separate business of their own. And the logistics of having to then run a family and be able to work together and just do the common things like shopping and cleaning and washing and drying. You've done it for 7 kids. How do you make your time effective? How do you actually make sure that you've got enough time for everything? How do you fit everything in?
Yes. Yeah, that's an excellent question because there are a lot of responsibilities and demands for any parent, regardless of how many children they have. And sometimes less children is more stressful because you don't have as many of them to entertain each other. So you're the entertainer. So any amount of children, and even just a couple doing a business together, or 2 businesses or a business together, can make your time very, very stressful and make it so there's so much that you have to get done in a day. And so, and I've experienced that, and I've had great results because of a few things that we've done to help us to make our time more effective. And one of the things I found is that to make your time the most effective, you have to choose what you're doing. What I mean by choose what you're doing means it has to be something you want to do because you care about it, not because someone else is making you do it or because you feel like you should. So it's
So
huge.
how do you do things that you don't want to do? Like when you've got boring stuff that
Yes.
you have to get through, doing your family tax or doing the laundry, and one person may really dislike that. How do you make it work?
That's an excellent question. And actually 2 days ago, we addressed this very thing. So with our housework, our house responsibilities, what we do is periodically write every responsibility down on a piece of paper that's huge, just a great big piece of paper. We put all of the responsibilities that need to be done. We say that these are the high priority ones. These are the high leverage ones, high traffic areas and things that get messy quickly. And we're like, okay, well, how are we going to do this? And we actually reinvent our system every few months instead of just, okay, now forever you're going to do this. You're going to always take out the trash. Instead, we reinvent the system. And what we do is we find that something that's boring for me is exciting for someone else. Something that's tedious and uncomfortable and I want to avoid it at all costs. For someone else, it's like, yeah, I could do that, no problem. And it's fascinating to ask the person their preferences. And not only does finding out their preferences help with the system, but it also gives respect to them. When someone feels respected, then they feel like they want to choose. And I'm going back to that, I choose. And so I can choose to do a task that I don't particularly enjoy, but when I choose, then it's just you bring a whole new level of you to the experience. Like I choose it, so then I'm going to do it and I'm going to enjoy it way more than if someone is saying I have to or I'm forced to or I should do it, but I don't want to. So realizing the approach that you take, whether you approach it from an I should or an I choose, it makes a world of difference. And if your children are feeling like they're supposed to and they should, just opening it up and saying, well, what would you like to do? What parts of cleaning do you like to do? And it's like to do it. Like they're like, yes, I like to do the sweeping, but I don't want to deal with the pile. I like to do the counters, but I don't want to move everything and put everything back. We match people up with teams and say like, okay, you're the team that cleans the bathroom and you do the stuff you like, they do the stuff they like, and we all bring a positive attitude because we chose.
Two insights that I get from that. The first thing is that instead of people who end up going home and arguing because they don't want to do this or someone expects them to do something, you're actually kind of saying, well, communicate, talk it out, get to learn and understand each other and respect what each other wants, which is really ingredients for a good relationship. It seems like common sense, but I know a lot of people don't do it, and a lot of people can fall into the trap of doing that. And I myself, when I do that, I notice that things go good. On the other hand, if you don't, it's very easy to fall into the trap of grinding. So that's a really good insight. And the second insight that I get for that, the home can be systemized like a business. Especially if you do have a fair few responsibilities. I also notice that sometimes people, when they're in business mode or they're in work mode, they're super organized. But when they get home, everything's just a mess and they let things go. And that's where the source of a lot of arguments can take place. So, those are my insights from that. And that's super helpful to be conscious of that, because then you can bring that to the environment that you're going to and actually implement and make things better. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So Stacy, another question that I have for you, and I know that a lot of people who I've discussed life with, this is something that often comes up, and it's about feeling close to each other. Sometimes because we're so tired, we're so stressed, we have a lot of things going on, a lot of things in our head. People can end up spending time with people but not really getting close. How do people develop being close, especially someone you love that you want to get closer to? Sometimes it's just difficult. How do you actually develop that closeness?
That's a very good question. And closeness is key in having a good relationship. If you think about your relationship, how do you know it's good? How do you know you're close? And the key is that you are happy when you think about them and happy when you're with them. Your emotional state in the context of that other person is going to determine how good you think the relationship is and how close you feel. But one thing that you find in life and in traditional relationships, and when I say traditional relationships, I'm kind of saying relationships that get worse and worse over time instead of better and better over time. So the traditional one, you look at marriages, they tend to get worse over time, and it's just kind of traditional. So let's not go with traditional and say we want something better than that. We want a relationship that gets better over time. So in traditional relationships, there are a lot of necessary things that happen that you show love by feeling bad. So like, for example, if you love someone and you miss them, what does it mean? Well, I feel bad when I think about them because I miss them. And there are actually 6 areas where people will use feeling bad as a way to show love. Not even just feeling bad because there's something wrong, but I feel bad to show love. But the more time you spend feeling bad while you're thinking about this other person, your relationship is being put at risk. It's going to get worse over time, not better. Why? Because how do you know a relationship is good? I feel good when I think about them and when I am with them. But if you're feeling bad to show love, you're not going to be feeling good when you're thinking about them or feeling good when you're with them.
You're saying that when you think about a person, you're associating a negative feeling to that
Yes.
thought. So you start developing these habits to think badly or feel badly when you're thinking of a person.
Exactly. And they seem harmless and they seem virtuous, actually. Like, how do you know our relationship is good? Oh, because she's so sad when they're apart. But the more time you spend feeling sad, the more risk you put the relationship at. And I'll just quickly go through some other areas. One is when you want to convey how important something is to you, like, honey, this is so important to me. Sometimes you get angry, like frustrated because you're trying to convey. You're not really feeling upset. You're just trying to say, this is really important. When couples are trying to say this is really important, they use a negative emotion to convey the high level of importance. And so that's another one. And I have structures in place that I help my clients with where we actually create a special space where they share the important things and share how important they are. But because it's in a structured space, they don't have to bring in the emotion to convey the level of importance. Another one is when you want someone to change. So I like to use the example with the parent and child relationship. If the child keeps forgetting their lunch money, how do you convey to them how important it is that they change? Well, you get upset. You're like, you don't forget your lunch money or I have to drive to school and bring you a lunch and that's inconvenient for me. And so realizing that when something's super important, we don't need to bring in a negative emotion to convey the importance. Why? Because the more time you spend feeling a way you don't like to feel in the relationship, it puts the relationship at risk. So those are just like innocent ones, right?
And I know that definitely the space is really important because you can contaminate a space. Like people sometimes will see a spot that they used to go to and they had a fight there, and it could be a place in the house or it could be a dinner restaurant they went to or a movie they went to, and they had a big fight, and then that they're put off from ever going to that place again. Or every time they go into a spot, especially if it's in your house, you associate these negative feelings in a certain area. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense, but it's I don't think people really think about that. Like, I mean, I definitely don't think about that on a day-to-day basis. So that is a really, really important insight. Was there anything else about that you were going to say before I started speaking?
I was just going to say that those were the kind of the innocent ones where they're passed off as virtues, those first 3. But then there are 3 that are less virtuous in the sense that they aren't hailed as a good thing, but they are very common. And one of the main ones is jealousy. So jealousy shows love. That's kind of the essence of jealousy. Like, I love you, so I'm going to be jealous. But how do you feel when you're jealous? It's not a pleasant feeling. Again, you don't want to spend more time feeling the down or negative ways. And so one of the ways you can approach it, and this is kind of fun, is you label your jealous self. You give your jealous self a name. And then whenever you're feeling jealous, you say, oh, and you give your nickname. So my nickname was SJ, my initials. So whenever I say SJ feels like this, SJ this, it means my jealous self. So I create a little layer of distance between me and that part of me. And then I realized that SJ doesn't really make any sense. Like it's not actually helping the relationship for me to feel bad in the context of our relationship. And so I just say, oh, SJ was feeling this. So I'm conveying the kind of irrational side of me that felt that way. And I'm able to convey the message without embracing that negative feeling. So jealousy is thought of as a good thing because it means the relationship is strong. You care about the other person. But we want to minimize the time we spend feeling the way we don't want to feel in relationships. And so minimizing jealousy.
Yeah, that's definitely something that's super common. Like parents, for example, get angry at their kids because they're trying to protect their kids. But, that kind of the good thought that they had is associated with a lot of negative feeling. And then sometimes it happens in the workplace a lot as well. You want to relay something important. I guess you have that negative message or feeling that you're feeling about someone to tell them a point that is important, and that can cause stress in relationships at work as well, especially if you're working with your close colleagues or friends or family, or maybe your partner, spouse, husband, wife. That's something that's pretty common. So yeah, that's really an amazing insight.
Thank you.
So here's one for you, Stacy. Sometimes people, whether they're friends or their colleagues or they're people who are married to each other or siblings, they have the same problem that they go through over and over and over again, and it never seems to get solved. How do you actually go through the process of fixing problems together? Because this is something that's so common, especially when it comes to businesses where there's a partnership or a husband-wife relationship and we're going through stuff, and then they say, oh yeah, I've told him that again for the 100th time, or for the last 7 years I've been saying that and you've never listened to me. And they seem to go through these problems again and again and again and again. How do you actually get past that? How do you solve problems?
Very good. Very good. So I like how you mentioned that people will have a problem that just comes up over and over again, a similar thing that just pops up routinely because it's not solved. Okay, so you brought up about how people will have the same problem over and over and it won't have a solution. And so one of the things that you can do when you bring up a problem is to think about a pie chart, and that pie chart represents the amount of time you're going to spend talking about this. And let's create the tiniest sliver to talk about what the problem is. Make that the smallest part of the conversation and make the biggest part of the conversation what you're going to do to solve it. It's best if the person who has the problem thinks about solutions before the conversation. So you're like, okay, I have this problem. Imagine my pie chart. Most of the time we're going to spend talking about solutions. So I could come prepared for the discussion by bringing my solutions. And whenever you bring solutions, when you have the problem and you're taking responsibility for the situation, then it completely changes the atmosphere of the conversation.
That's very simple, straightforward, and very uncommon. I've seen people many times just focus 100% of their time on the problem, and the other person is focusing 100% of their time on the problem with the other person, but no one's coming up with solutions. Are there any other tips you can help with that, Stacy, where if you're struggling to actually focus on the solution, how do you go about that? If you can't come up with perhaps a solution that works for both people, how do you deal with that?
Okay, yes. And sometimes when there is a problem and then you have two different points of view and you're trying to come together and say, let's come up with a solution that makes it all work for both of us. One of the traditional kinds of ways to do that is to compromise. While compromise is amazing in its own way, it's actually saying, let's come up with a solution that neither one of us like. Like that's kind of what compromise is. Neither one of us like it. And so what we can do is we can look at things in a different way and say, instead of it being my way and your way, let's look at the end result. What do we want to accomplish? And then say, let's take your way and my way out of it and just say, what are ways that could solve it. What happens is you open up your mind to see that there can be hundreds of ways that could solve it that aren't necessarily the two that you brought up with. You sometimes get very narrow and it has to be my way. So
Yeah.
take away my way and your way and say, how can we solve it and get this outcome? Then you're so much more creative in your problem solving process.
That is so you just kind of really nailed it there, because a lot of these issues where people can't fix the problem is because their solution, they're so invested to put their solution as the solution, whereas the other person may be trying to fight for their solution and they want it to, be theirs. They want to get the credit for the solution, or they want to get their way. But if you remove the, you versus me or us versus them, then you just come up with the best solution, and the ego doesn't get in the way of whose it was. That is really, really clever.
Thank you. It's been so helpful for my clients and for my family.
So here's one that I don't know if you have an answer to. You're probably gonna be someone in the world that everyone's gonna chase. I had a colleague once that said, the longer you get married and the longer you remain with someone, the intimacy just goes downhill over time. So is it possible to create intimacy and refresh it? And how do you do that?
Okay, that's an excellent question. I feel like the authority because of the trajectory my relationship has taken, where we started out with intimacy being good but not amazing, and then getting better and better over the years. So we've been together, it will be 40 or it will be 30 years this year, married 30 years, and it's gotten better and better, and I would say it's the best it's ever been. There is a secret that we've learned, and it is amazing, and it has made all of the difference. And so I would describe it in this way. A lot of times when people are being intimate, they take turns. It's your turn to do this job, and it's my turn to feel this way. And so they'll take turns. And so when you're administering the good feelings, you're not really feeling them yourself, because you're like, oh, this is not for me, it's for them. So it's kind of like a one-way street where they're only feeling things one way. And the secret is where you find ways to feel it and give it at the same moment. It's amazing. Like, it's a game changer. You're not shutting your emotion down when you're trying to help the other person feel positive emotion. You're actually feeling it as strongly as if you were receiving it while you're giving it. It does take practice because it's not instinctive. It's instinctive to be like, this is my job. I'm taking care of you. I can't enjoy myself because I'm taking care of you. And then you take turns doing that. That's kind of more the typical way. But to actually foster the feelings the entire time, whether you are giving or receiving, it creates a spiral, an upward spiral that just keeps going higher and higher, because you're building on each other's pleasure and enjoyment instead of taking turns and then shutting it down. So that's kind of my answer.
How do people maintain that spark for each other after a long period of time and perhaps going through a whole bunch of stresses in life? How do they maintain the spark to even keep the flame alive?
Okay, so over time, one of the things that couples will do that protects the relationship is they save all of their excitement and interest and fun and passion for each other, which is beautiful. It's something couples should do. They protect it and they save it, and it's for each other. That's what needs to happen in long-term relationships. But what inadvertently is a side effect of this is that they will shut down all of those feelings of passion and excitement, the spark. They will shut it down in 99% of their life and try to only have it in 1% of their life in that half an hour before bedtime. You see how if you shut it down most of the time and then you're like, okay, now I want to have it, it doesn't work that way. You've got to be open to the flow of this beautiful passion and spark throughout most of the day, throughout most of your life. It can't just be isolated in one small few hours of the day or a few minutes of the day. Like, it's got to be something that is fostered throughout the day. And so what you do is you foster the feeling and you keep the focus on your spouse and or on your partner. And so in action, all of your actions reflect this. My passion, my spark, it's all directed toward my partner. But that doesn't mean you don't feel it during the day. It doesn't mean you shut it down during the day. You're open to the flow of it throughout your life. And it's not just intimacy, it's the spark and passion for life. It's not just one little thing, it's the whole thing. You want to grow your spark and your enjoyment and your passion for life. And if you grow it for life, it will manifest in those times when you want it to with your partner.
I was just going to ask, what about people who, because they're buried in problems, uh, the spark is gone, like the flame is gone. They don't even have the time to, to actually light it up, and they're just so stressed out there, and there's just so many things they need to deal with, especially busy people. How do they do that? Because what you're saying is some people who have spark need to manage that spark, but what about people whose flame is out? How do they reignite that flame?
Okay, so just having it be a priority. So acknowledging that it's not there and just saying it's not there and not doing anything about it is going to keep it the same. So just acknowledging the spark's gone out and we want to do something about it. And we'll kind of go, one of the things that I've talked about in the past was the yes storm. So whenever you have a problem, you want to bring a solution mindset, right? We're not going to focus on the problem the whole time. We're going to focus a lot on solution mindset. So you do a yes storm and you're like, we want to bring this spark back. It's a high priority for me. I don't necessarily have extra time to do it, but I want to do it. And so then you have a yes storm where you're like, okay, what are all of the ways we could bring the spark back? And just having that conversation, I can guarantee that you're going to get excited. You're going to be like, oh, what if we tried this? What if we did this? Like being creative and curious and having a commitment to the change is sometimes most of what you need.
Okay, so that's an interesting one. So getting that process started of actually reigniting the spark and actually trying to figure out what's gonna help do that, is you're saying that that process in itself is going to help light things up.
Exactly right. Just emphasizing this is a priority for me. I want to change it and I'm curious and open to new ideas and then try them and just discussing ideas that maybe you would actually never implement is very powerful.
Cool. So Stacy, here's another common thing that I come across all the time when it comes to just generally people in relationships, whether it's a business partnership or it's a spouse relationship. How do they handle money? It's something that is very uncomfortable for a lot of people to speak about, and it can often, I'd say, a huge amount of personal stresses that people have is how do they handle their financials. And a lot of people don't agree on how they should use their money. So what do you do, and what would you advise on how to kind of bridge that gap and have people work together and not make that an issue in their life?
Very good question. Very good question. I think this is one that's prevalent that people have in marriages. One of the main reasons why marriages fail is based on money and how they handle money. And if they can handle it successfully, then it makes such a big difference in the marriage. One of the ways I like to think about it is money is a demonstration of your priorities. How you use money demonstrates what your priorities are. And two people are going to have their own structure, their own belief system, their own priorities about what's important to them. It's going to be unique to every individual. If you look at them as a bookcase and say, this bookcase is full of books and these book titles represent this person, what is going to be on your bookshelf? So my bookshelf would have books about yoga and it would have books about parenting and about loving relationships and coaching. And, so I look at my bookshelf and it has all of my priorities. Okay. So think of them as book titles. And then look at your partner's bookshelf and think about what would be on their bookshelf. What are the book titles that would be on theirs? So think about their talents, their interests, their priorities, what do they value? What do they spend their time, money, and resources on? That's going to be kind of building up what is important to them. And two people are going to be very different, right? It makes it more clear when we think of the bookshelf because we're like, yeah, our books are completely different. Like we have completely different bookshelves. And to realize that how we want to spend money is going to reflect the priorities that we have that we've built throughout the years. And so number one in dealing with money is to respect that the way they want to spend money is going to reflect their personal unique priority system. When you're thinking about their unique priority system, to realize that it's going to be different from yours and just have that be a starting point to realize, okay, how we spend money and how we value things is going to be different. Just allowing it to be different is one of the most important steps.
What about people who just cannot agree? Because you have a limited amount. For a lot of people, it's a limited amount, right? A lot of people don't have that abundance mindset. It takes a bit of time, a lot of personal development to create that mindset. And if you have that kind of thinking, I mean, the obvious answer would be create more abundance in your life. If you're currently in this position where you are arguing about how to use limited resources and you just don't agree, how do you get over that?
Okay, I've been in this situation that you're describing where there was extremely limited funds. You know, we had 7 children in 16 years and we didn't have a lot of extra. One of the things that we did was we looked at the budget and we prioritized it and had the things that were important to us. And then we actually went with, I don't know if you're familiar with Dave Ramsey, but we went to the cash system. So you don't necessarily need to go and use the cash system, but I'll share with you what we learned. And that is that when we spent cash for things, we actually saw the value of things more. When you're actually handing over the dollars, and the dollars represent the time that you spent at work, it makes it so that you're questioning, is this purchase useful or not? That's one of the things we did. Another thing we did is with every single purchase, we rated the purchase. So you have the right after you purchased it, the feeling that you got from the purchase. But then if you wait a few days and go back to your purchase, you can actually say, was this purchase worth the money? Would I spend more for it than I did because I used it so much and I appreciated it, I'd actually spend more than I paid? Or would I want to spend less because it wasn't as useful? So when you're making purchases, a lot of times it's gut reflex and I want to make this purchase because it feels good. But then later we look back and go, I didn't really use it. I didn't really appreciate it. So what this experiment did, after every purchase, I would just do a little, thing in the book that said, okay, was this worth it or was it not worth it, basically?
How do you deal with the situation where, because you have, a husband and 7 kids, does everyone have to have the equal amount shared? Or is it okay if people have different amounts that you split between them? Because everyone's got different needs. If you spend more on maybe yourself versus your partner, could there be bad feelings there? Or one kid versus another kid, do you get that emotion where they don't think they're being valued as much as someone else?
That's very good. That's very good. And we've dealt with it in different ways throughout the years. And I've advised clients to deal with it with their children in different ways. And one of the ways that has been effective is that they get a baseline kind of amount of money that they can spend. And then if they want more, then they need to do extra chores, extra jobs. And also we've helped each of the children to come up with a business idea so that they can bring in funds outside the family. And if you see your brother's doing the lemonade stand or the yard care business and he's buying new iPods and everything, then you're not as critical of them spending more money than you because you see that they put forth the effort. And so this has a benefit because it helps the child to develop an entrepreneurial lifestyle, an entrepreneurial perspective on life. When you want more funds, you can create them. So
That's a great idea because I guess if you were the parents and you were just handing out more to one child than the other
yes.
child, it can create feelings of jealousy versus if they were to earn their money, then it makes sense that they have potentially a disproportionate amount compared to each other. So that's a really great piece of advice there.
Thank you. I thought that it would be helpful, especially because people listening to this are entrepreneurs, like they're business owners. And so they want to foster that in their children.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so this question here is specifically for people with kids. And this is something I've seen a lot, especially there's certain family members who I've seen when they had children, their entire life went into the kids, picking them up from school, dropping them off to childcare, picking someone else up, taking them to gymnastics, taking one to piano, one goes to ballet, one goes to swimming, one goes to tennis. And their entire life just becomes all about the kids. And they're so tired, they're so ragged, they don't have time for each other. How do you actually create balance when you've got, like, for yourself, you've got 7 children? How do you actually make time for yourself and make time for your spouse as well?
Very good question. And especially with so many different schedules, so many different priorities, all of the things that go on in a family. I want to give a basic principle for this, and that is that people care the most about the things that affect them the most. And so in a family, your child is going to care the most about the things that impact them. You as a mom, you're going to care the most about the things that really impact you. And so to keep this as your baseline for all of your structure, all of your scheduling, everything that you do as a family, realize this idea that the things that we care about the most, we want to leverage this idea. And so what we've done is we find out what the kids' priorities are, what matters to them, and then we give them responsibility for that thing. So for example, if they want to be in choir, it's their thing. They're responsible for it. They care the most about it. So we give it all the responsibility to them. They're in charge of it. And so whenever you do that with the things that you care about and give the responsibility to the person, then you know that that thing is going to happen. As a mom, what I've done is I've actually delegated so much more than what moms think they can delegate. You can delegate things that are important to the child to them, and then the child makes sure that it happens. And this happens in every area. So like, for example, dishes. If there's a bunch of dirty dishes in the sink that are everybody's, nobody really cares about the dishes. They don't want to do the dishes because they're everybody's dishes. But if they don't have any dishes to use, then they start to care. So what we did, for example, with the dishes, is we gave everyone their own dishes. They care a lot about their own dishes and they keep them clean so that they have clean dishes. And then there's no dishes that ever stack up in the sink because everyone does their own. So
You mean like personalized dishes for each
personalized
person? Oh,
dishes.
wow.
Yes, personalized laundry. You have your laundry day. You do your own loads during these hours of the day that are yours. And so it makes it so you want to give the responsibility to the person when it's something the person cares about. And instead of it being all community, we've tried it out with everything, like even with food, having people cook their own meals and buy their own food and put their backpack on and go to the grocery store and they get their food, whatever it is you can put into their sphere of influence so that it's something they care about. So then they have responsibility for it. They will do amazing things, take care of their own belongings. They will do their own laundry, their own cooking, their own
Wow.
scheduling and things like that. So it's kind of like I'm overseeing instead of working in the family, I'm working on the family. I'm not doing the daily tasks. I'm empowering everyone to do their own daily tasks. So then I have time to do the things I care about, which I like
Yeah,
to
so
do.
you, I couldn't imagine laundry day with the 9 people in the house. But so you're saying that each kid does their own laundry, they do their own cooking, they have their own food, they have their own dishes, and they do that all independently?
That's correct. Yeah.
Wow.
But I wanted to convey the principle of it because that's how we've implemented it. But I don't necessarily think everyone should implement it that way. But just take the principle and say, as much as possible, give the person responsibility for the things that they care about. And then they will do it without any reminders, any complaining, anything, because they care about it. It's their thing. So I'll get notes under my door that say, Mom, I have a choir concert coming up. Please come. I'm not the one with the schedule. I'm not the one organizing it. They invite me because that's something that's important to them.
How do you do that when you've got small children who will find it hard to do their own laundry? Let's say they're 4 years old or 5 years old. How young do you get them doing their own laundry?
As soon as they can walk, they can help. And what you
Wow.
do is when they're tiny, you help them feel the responsibility of it. They fold the washcloths, and then you compliment them on how well they're folding the washcloths, even though their little chubby fingers can barely do it. You give them that feeling of responsibility, and chores can be done at very, very young ages. Obviously, when they're little, they're not actually doing the chore. It's much easier if you do it for them. But that's not what we're doing here. We're not making it efficient when they're young. We're teaching them a skill that when they're older will make everyone's life more efficient.
I personally have experienced this myself when Stacy came and made us breakfast with her family. It was like a little army going around and creating food. Some people had bacon, some people had bread, some people had sausages and different things. So I definitely saw it at work, and they just managed themselves. Like, you didn't really have to say anything to anyone. They just knew what to do, and they all seemed to work with each other, and they all seemed to be just so happy doing it. It's something that's just spectacular and something that you've got to see. So yeah, thank you for that, Stacy. That's really, really an amazing piece of advice there.
Thank you.
Okay, now this is more for individuals and people who want to grow in their own self, their own development, their own personal growth. How would you advise people who want to get started on that journey? What steps would you get them to take to help them improve themselves?
Thank you. One of the things I've found with my clients is that they will be on a personal growth journey and their spouse isn't. And they feel like they really want their spouse to be more on the personal growth journey. And they also want their spouse to support them in their personal growth. Like, it's so important to me. I want to do it. And they want their spouse to be like, I support you, take the time you need to do this personal growth, but also they kind of want their spouse to grow as well. And so there's several parts to this question. You want the spouse to support you in your personal growth, or you want to encourage your spouse to grow more. So the second part about helping your spouse to grow in their personal growth journey, and one of the ways that you can influence someone else is through positive influence instead of negative influence. So positive influence is where I like to use the example of a teacher. Think of your favorite teacher in school. Think of the teacher you loved the most, and think about what did they do to make me just love them and want to do the assignments and want to do the class. They used positive enforcement. They used positive influence to get you to do the things. And then think of a teacher that was your worst teacher. They usually demanded, they were nagging, they didn't have a relationship with the students, they were grouchy or demanding. So think of those two different teachers and realize that we have the most influence in someone else's life when we positively influence instead of negatively influence. And so we look for areas that they're doing well and compliment them and see the best in what they're already doing. So then we're creating this closeness and this relationship where you have that structure in place. And then once they start being more comfortable with you and they'll start actually asking you, they'll come to you and say, I would like to change this, or I would like to improve here. And do you have any advice? Because that's what you would do to your best teacher, your teacher you loved so much. You want to learn more. You want to do more to please and to build the relationship with the teacher, to grow that respect that goes both ways. So that's the second part. Did you have any questions about that one?
Yeah, well, what about people where one person wants to grow and wants to spend time and effort and potential travel trips, and they have to spend some money to do that? What about if their spouse is against them doing that and they don't see the importance in it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good question. When you have different priority systems, when you have different things that you value, then it's challenging when one person really values something and wants to put time and resources toward it, and the other person doesn't support it. And one of the ways is to actually look at how you interact with them about this topic. And what you could do is kind of imagine you have a video camera videoing you as you're talking to them about it. And then think about it later as if you were watching from a third person point of view. And then just ask yourself, how did I come across? Because a lot of times when we really want something and we're trying to convey it to the other person, we're not acting in the very best way that we could to facilitate it. Instead, we're just trying to kind of push it on the other person, or we're trying to present it as you should. And because we're so excited, we want to. And it comes across as I'm not happy with you, or I want to change you. And so one of the biggest things that I use in my relationship coaching is something called belonging cues. You help the other person see that they're safe here, they have a future here, and you love them and you care about them exactly the way that they are. So just look at your cues. And it's funny because we get it in our head when we know what we want, we think we're doing it in the best way because we're so excited about what we want and the outcome, and we see how it can benefit everyone, but we don't really look at small decisions and our small expressions and our tone of voice. So kind of look at yourself and say, was I pushing this on them? Was I making them think that I wasn't satisfied with them the way that they are right now? Like, look at the way you're approaching it and say, was I giving them belonging cues that say, I'm happy with you, you're safe here, we have a future together? Or was I saying, I want you to change, I'm not happy with you the way you are, you should be different? And so we can still influence them. That doesn't mean we can't influence them. We can use positive influence, but we want to do it with belonging cues.
Do you think that people are afraid that if one person takes on that journey that they're going to get left behind, and that's why they fight against it?
That's possible. It's possible that they don't have what it takes to grow and that they might get left in the dust. So they kind of hold the other person back from growing. I think that that could be the case. But if you were to ask them if that's the case, I don't think they would agree. On the outside, they would feel defensive about it. But if they could somehow see them, okay, I have a thing for this, and it's called a clear the table exercise, where you put everything on the table. The worst thing that could happen, you just put it on the table and you say to your partner, what's the worst thing that could happen if I pursued this goal or this dream? What's the worst thing that could happen if I grew myself to be able to do these things that I'm trying to do? And ask them, what are all the bad things that could happen? And it would be, it creates a safe space for them to say worst case scenarios without saying, this is actually how I feel, because then they might feel defensive, or they might not truly look at the core issue. Sometimes people hide the core issues from themselves, but doing this exercise helps them to be free to say, well, the worst thing that would happen is you would go to these conventions, you would meet some other wonderful, successful, beautiful person and or handsome person and want them more than me. And just giving them the opportunity to say that could happen. It's the worst thing that would happen, but just giving them the opportunity to say it and then say, but what's the best thing that could happen? Let's look at the best thing. Well, the best thing that could happen was that I would grow, I would learn, I would come back, I would be a much better partner, much better husband, wife, or child. I mean, not child, but parent. And so helping them see that that would be the best case. And then what's the most likely? The most likely is that nothing bad would happen, like help them see that. And just getting the worst thing out there on the table and then clearing the table from it and being like, that's probably not what's going to happen is, it's been highly beneficial.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So, Stacy, one of the other things that I have noticed happens a lot in relationships is the familiarization. Everything starts becoming too familiar and it becomes kind of monotonous. It becomes more like a transactional type of thing. How do you get more enjoyment out of a relationship instead of having that kind of chore of having to listen to that person again and having to spend time with the person rather than enjoying that time and enjoying the things that you are doing together? Because I've found that in good relationships, you can do probably the most boring or worst things you can think of and people really enjoy it. Whereas some people are going on a holiday, having fun, but they can never seem to enjoy it. How do you enjoy your time together?
Very good. Very good. I like to think of enjoyment as a skill that you practice. And if you were to compare it to playing the piano, let's say you have no experience with the piano, and I had you sit down at the piano and said, okay, play this Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, play all of these difficult pieces or notes. You didn't know how to read music. You didn't know how. You wouldn't be able to create the sound that you wanted. But then if you practice and you're like, okay, now I know how to read music and now I know what all of the different things are, and I can play some basic songs. I could play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, or, things like that. So you're growing in your skill, and people understand that when we're talking about the piano or sports or things like that. But when we're talking about the skill of enjoyment, people don't think of it as a skill because they believe that life delivers happiness. or takes happiness away based on how good or bad the environment is treating us. So if you think of Christmas, people think Christmas will deliver happy feelings because you're with your family, you're giving gifts, you're sharing good food. So people think that they need to go to their environment to find more enjoyment. They need to have more Christmases. They need to have more vacations. They need to have things in their life that deliver the enjoyment. But actually, it's the other way around. You bring enjoyment to the situation, and you can practice bringing more enjoyment to things. And you can even bring enjoyment to things like you mentioned earlier about the couple. I mean, the relationship, and how some people, they could be doing just menial, tedious tasks and enjoying. Why? The task didn't bring the joy. They brought the enjoyment to the task.
Hmm. That is a very, very interesting perspective and insight because, yeah, I have noticed a lot of times that bringing the enjoyment to something you're doing, even if it's probably like the most boring or even difficult thing, can be really happy if you approach it that way. So yeah, that's something that's a really different way of thinking, and you've got so many different ways of thinking that's just so unique. It's really so enjoyable to discuss these kind of things with you. So I have another question, and I'll leave this as the last question because there's so many things that we can talk about. We can probably speak for hours and hours. This is, I think, a very, very important one between people, and it's about trust and respect. And in some relationships, that trust has been undermined or the respect has been eroded. How do you regain trust and respect for each other when some of those things have been chipped away at?
Yes, this is a very, very good question. Trust and respect are what people build the foundation of their relationship on. And it's crucial. It's crucial that you have it. But I would like to ask you, what is in your, what I call word baggage, meaning what is the definition of your word for trust and your word for respect? And by asking this, I want you to really inspect and say, what does it mean when I trust them? And what does it mean when they respect me? And look at it, because everyone has packed different information into the words that they use. It's almost like we speak the language of us and they speak the language of them. And we need to better understand their language. What do they pack into their words? It's very helpful to inspect what is in the definition for you, because you want to be very careful that your word for trust doesn't mean I want them to do everything that serves me, because sometimes that's what trust is. Sometimes parents will say, I don't trust my child, but what they're really saying is, I don't trust my child to behave like I think they should all of the time. And we're each unique as individuals. With, we talk about our bookshelf, how we're unique. We're our own person. And so the things that are important to us in our life to act and to be are going to be unique. And so to realize, when you look at your word for trust, make sure your word doesn't say, I want them to act only in ways that serve me. It's hard to take that time to be introspective because we just want to assume that we always want what's best for the other person. But to really look and say, do I really want what's best for them, or do I really want what's going to make my life easier and better? So that would be a kind of a key element to look at, is to inspect what is in your word baggage for the word trust and the word respect, and make sure that it's something that serves both of you, not just one of you.
Hmm. And what about for people who they may love each other and care about each other very much, but something big has happened in their life that really has damaged that trust or respect? How do you work on getting back on track?
Okay. So if you look at small choices, how small choices all along the way affect an outcome. When you do lots of little things over the years, then you get a certain outcome. I like to use the example of health. The things that you eat day to day create your health. In the last 5 years, they create your health for today. It's not just what you ate yesterday or last week. It was lots of little choices that gave you the current health that you have now. And that's the same with relationships. There were lots of little choices. It may seem like they did something big, a one-time thing that disrupted the trust or made it so that you don't trust them. But there were lots of little choices that brought them to that one thing. So for example, if you fall down the stairs because you've not been working on your strength, your flexibility, your dexterity for years. And maybe you're not the weight that you want to be. You could say falling down the stairs was the event and that was the worst thing, but there were lots of small choices that led to that. And so same with this trust you're talking about, there were lots of small choices that you didn't see as very big or monumental. They were just small and they affected the way things are. So what we want to do is we want to be making small adjustments as you go. Another great analogy is an airplane. When it's flying, 99% of the time it's off course. It's just always redirecting to be able to get to the main destination. And so what you want to do is you want to see life as these small adjustments that you want to make along the way. And it's interesting because when they say they did do something that was like, you felt like was unforgivable, there were little things along the way that little choices they made along the way that brought them to that point. And what you want to do is you want to see that together you can make little changes and choices that can bring you back from that. It's not like now we fell down the stairs and this is the end. No, you were like, oh, I fell down the stairs because of all of these lifestyle changes. Let's tweak and change and improve the diet and strength and flexibility, and then realize we can grow back. We can get our health back 100%. You can recover 100%, but you can't recover 100% with another big thing. You have to get there by making lots of small adjustments and incremental changes throughout the path. And I would say that some of these little incremental things are about enjoying each other more. The more time you spend enjoying in the context of your relationship, the more time you spend enjoying thinking about them, and when you're with them, the more your relationship will grow close and you won't have these issues of trust because you will have been making small adjustments along the way to enjoy the relationship. A lot of times these big things that happen are because you weren't enjoying the time you had together.
So thanks so much, Stacy, for sharing all of that. I found each and every answer that you provided me an insight to be really, really thought-provoking and valuable. And I think this is something that's really useful, not only for people who own and run businesses and want to grow businesses, but just for anyone who wants to improve themselves, anyone who has relationships, which is pretty much all of us. So how can people find you if they want to look you up?
Find me on happyliferesults.com, stacymcpherson.com, also at Stacy J. McPherson on Instagram and Facebook, or you can email me at stacy@stacymcpherson.com.
Thank you so much, Stacy. That was a fantastic chat. Look forward to chat with you again next time. All the best, and bye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.